would like to meditate on a verse. It's very obscure, but at the same time applicable to a control spirit, a spirit of intimidation, manipulation, and bullying that we can see in organizations or in families. And that is Micah 5:12, KJV. I will cut off witchcrafts out of thine hand. I will cut off witchcrafts out of thine hand. This is referring to God bringing judgment and punishment and chastisement on Israel because they had allowed fortune tellers and people like this to grip them through the Baal prophets, through occult prophecy. And what would end up happening is people would come to trust in that instead of God. And why do people go to these things in the first place? Well, in an age of science, it's kind of hard to understand why anyone would go to a fortune teller. But if you can remember the story of Saul in the Old Testament, Saul was a supernaturalist. No matter which way you look at him, he believed in the supernatural. So even though he fell away from the Lord, he believed in the supernatural. And he started off believing in the supernatural through Samuel, who gave him visions and words of knowledge. And it's definitely possible that Saul also experienced dreams and visions and things, because he had an experience where people were like, is Saul not also among the prophets? So there was always an element of mystical experience with King Saul. But when he turned his back on the Lord, he goes to the witch of Endor to have a seance, right? So why did he do that? Well, it's because he said that the Lord did not answer him by dream or Urim or prophet or Thummim. He wanted an answer from a supernatural source to give him guidance in his war, in his battle plans. He knew that he couldn't do it on his own, and he needed divine guidance. And if he wasn't going to get guidance from the God of Israel, he was going to get guidance from some other God. He needed guidance. This much he knew. He needed supernatural guidance. So what is witchcraft? Witchcraft is essentially going to a foreign god through a pagan medium to help you make connection with that God, to give you power over a situation that you feel like you're powerless over. Okay? And usually this applies to money, or it can apply to love, or it can apply to battle plans. In the case of King Saul, he wanted supernatural direction about battle plans. Okay? So witchcraft is always a way for people to feel more in control of their lives, because they're in touch with the supernatural force that claims to help them out of a difficult situation. It's a human cry for wisdom from a supernatural source. Please give me direction. Please give me supernatural direction. Of course, outside of God, that's demonic. Okay, and so when you have Micah 5:12 saying, I will cut off witchcrafts out of thy hand. What is the out of thy hand? Probably reference to people holding idols in their hands, or charms or something like this. We'll cut them out. Cut it out. Cut it out. Matthew Henry said, many of them depended much upon the conduct and advice of their conjurers, diviners, and fortune tellers. And those God will cut off, not only as weak things and insufficient to relieve them, but as wicked things and sufficient to ruin them. Why? Because it would lead them into sin. Witchcraft doesn't forbid sexual immorality. And so God's punishment would come on them. The Bible says adulterers and whoremongers God will judge. And also, oftentimes curses attend the people that go to fortune tellers. If you don't pay them enough money, you're going to get into a car accident. Something like that is going to happen. I will cut off witchcrafts out of thy hand, and thou shalt no more take hold of them, and stay thyself upon them. And thou shalt have no more soothsayers, for thou shalt be convinced that all their pretensions are a cheat. The justice of the nation shall cut them off. This is Matthew Henry. The justice of the nation shall cut them off according to law. Leviticus 20, verse 27. Now a man or a woman who is a medium or a spiritist must be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones. They have brought their own deaths upon themselves. The preaching of the gospel, Matthew Henry says, brought men off from using curious arts. Acts 19:19. Many of those who practiced magic brought their books together and began burning them in the sight of everyone. And they added up the prices of the books and found it to be 50,000 pieces of silver. So these were magic books, grimoires, satanic Bibles, all kinds of stuff like that. And they burned them in public. They had a holy bonfire. Now this is a reference to people that are involved in Satanism and stuff like that, Wicca, actual occult. But I would like to extend it because I believe in the secular world, the problem still exists. In the business world, we have social Darwinism, survival of the fittest, natural selection, looking out for number one, bullying, bossing, and that's no different than witchcraft. In practice, what is witchcraft again? What's the ultimate impulse? Not to have a supernatural experience per se, but to reach out to that supernatural force in order to have control over your situation. So now when we take the supernatural part out, right, we take all that Harry Potter part out, we still have plenty of people trying in such and so many ways, witchcrafts, if you will, methods, witchcrafts, if you will, to exert control over their situations. And oftentimes that control over their situations is pointed at coworkers or people under them or people beside them at work to exert, quote, control over their situation. You can call that a witchcraft, if you will. It doesn't have to be supernatural. It's a method, it's a means by which men employ methods and means and schemes, wicked schemes, one of the 6 things that God hates, wicked schemes to control people, to exert control over their situation. They feel powerless in some sort of a situation. Maybe it's a job situation, or maybe it's some situation in their family, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's at a church. They feel powerless in something, some aspect about whatever it is they're in. And in order to exert control over their situation, they resort to, quote unquote, witchcrafts of many kinds. And these are just wicked schemes. One of the 6 abominations that God hates in Proverbs. Wicked schemes. And this, I believe, could apply to the occult, but I believe it could also just apply to certain people who are control freaks. They're just control freaks. They're bullies. They're involved in bullying, harassment, abuse, and they're just control freaks. But God says, I will cut off such witchcrafts out of thine hand. So God is, if you see a person like this, you need to rest assured God is against that person. God is against that person, and it's just a matter of time until that person will be cut off and cut out because of that behavior. It says in Ephesians 4:31, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. And this certainly is referring to these control freak type behaviors, these types of people that are bullies and bossy and harassers, and we're not talking about people who stand up for themselves sometimes. We're not talking about those who sometimes stand up and plead the cause of the poor and needy. We're not talking about people who have guts to say what needs to be said. We're talking about people who pride themselves in exerting control over other people, and they're generally characterized by bitterness and in other words, hatred, and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking, defaming another person's reputation. This is to be put away from you. This person is to be put away from you, along with all malice, ill intent, mean-spirited malevolence. And this is the witchcrafts of modern day, I believe. We've got people like this all over our companies, all over our churches, in our families. But God says, I will cut off witchcrafts out of thine hand. God's against that control spirit. And if you know anybody like that, you have at least Micah 5:12 and Ephesians 4:31 to claim and to pray against that person. that they either A, change their heart, or B, removed from their sphere of influence, because God will cut off witchcrafts out of thine hand. God bless you out there. This is John with WesleyGospel.com.